So I first just wanted to start with just a quick video, just telling you a little bit more about what the NeuroNode Trilogy and Control Bionics is about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And my videos for you. And hopefully.
Meet the NeuroNode Trilogy, the latest assistive communication device from Control Bionics. The Trilogy is a Windows-based solution for those living with paralysis and loss of speech due to conditions like cerebral palsy, SMA, TBI, spinal cord injury, or ALS-MND. This device combines 3 access methods: touch control, eye control, and NeuroNode 3.0 control. Putting these access methods together allows for the fastest, most efficient communication speed, while simultaneously reducing user fatigue. Not only does this solution provide a voice for the voiceless, but it also provides environmental control and native computer control. The 3-in-1 solution relieves the pressure of getting the right device for right now and provides a solution for the present and future. As a user's condition changes due to a progressive illness or daily fatigue, the NeuroNode Trilogy can adapt to that person's abilities using their preferred access method. The Trilogy is also backed by our industry-leading customer support. Contact us anytime, day or night, and our team will be there. There are many funding options available in NeuroNode Trilogy, including funding support through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the Veterans Administration, and various departments of education. Visit our website at www.controlbionics.com to learn more, or give us a call at 513-453-4848 to schedule an assessment with your local representative.
Awesome. So I hope you guys got like a good idea sort of about what the Trilogy is. And now I just want to make sure that you can see it. So this is the Trilogy. Maybe it's harder to do it on a device. This is the Trilogy. So you can see that it is a Windows-based device with the casing around the side, and then along the bottom is that eye gaze portion. So that is actually the iTech TM5 Mini for anyone that is familiar with this sort of technology. We tried to utilize what we were saying in the video, the idea that these types of patients, those with complex communication needs, are often juggling between multiple communication methods. So similarly as you might use a schedule, a written day planner, your iPhone, all of those things to control your life, users of augmentative communication access devices are going to do something similar. So we wanted to find a niche in the market where these users could, one fundable solution, be able to utilize a device all of the time for all of their needs. So this device, like it said, offers the NeuroNode technology, which we'll get into that, and that is essentially what is in that little casing. It's the circle device. It looks, you guys can see that, just like this. It is essentially snapped into a watch band. So it looks just like that. Let me go back to my video screen for you. So it snaps right in, and it just like slides on. For here, it'll be like my wrist, but anywhere on your body. So this could be extended to be on your thigh. You could technically wear it across your head if you wanted to for a headband. We also have a variety of electrode options. So for somebody that maybe wanted to eyebrow raise with their method of activation, we could do that as well. The big thing is we want to make sure that you don't have to choose. We know that you get one fundable solution every 5 years. And for AAC, just because that 5 years is up does not mean that insurance is going to necessarily say, hi, great, you want the newest and greatest technology, here, let's get it for you. You really have to make a just cause for why that is. So we wanted to find a solution that would be a one-stop shop for somebody that may be able to use all of these methods, whether that's traditional eye gaze, direct select, or switch scanning or to use them in combination. So I will show you and do a demo at the end of this just so you can get a good idea of what that looks like on this device itself. But I just wanted to kind of run through the pieces of that so that you could see how it looks. You might, if you're familiar with AAC, also see on the device that we run the Grid 3 software from Smartbox Technologies. We really love Grid 3. I think that it gets them through a holistic view of the communication user. So whether they are an emergent communicator, a child that has pre-literacy skills, or maybe an adult with ALS that is literate, that just needs access to a keyboard, some core words, and storing phrases. Grid 3 can get them across that continuum if needed. That being said, we try to see ourselves as language software agnostic. So if you come to us with, say, Snap Plus Core is the language software that you've been using, if it's available on a Windows device, we can do that for you as well. The only thing we like to check is to make sure that our NeuroNode is still compatible with that software. So we try to work with everybody to make sure that we are understanding of all of the communication needs, whether that is access or whether that is language software. A lot of times there are barriers to both of those. And so we're trying to kind of find that solution that's going to work best for somebody at all stages of it. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I am going to now show the second video that just shows you a little bit more. I mean, for the most part, people understand the direct select of the user, and most everybody has heard about eye gaze, at least in the traditional sense of dwell and blink. But what people are most interested in, or I guess most unfamiliar with, is this NeuroNode. So I want to just show another quick video that kind of gives you an overview, and then I will show you myself using it the same way so you guys can get some good feedback and ideas about what is going on there. So let me minimize this.
At the heart of the Control Bionics product line is the NeuroNode 3.0. The latest generation of the world's leading wearable control device. The NeuroNode 3.0 connects to the user's communication device via Bluetooth and is attached to the user with a non-adhesive NeuroNode band, or a NeuroNode 3.0 has two built-in methods for access and activation of the user's communication device: EMG control or spatial control. When using EMG control, the NeuroNode 3.0 reads the signal associated with the activation of a muscle group from the surface of the user's skin. The NeuroNode 3.0 can be placed externally anywhere on the user's body. Two common placements are the forehead for eyebrow raise and the arm for finger and wrist flexion. The advantage of the EMG mode is that the device is advanced enough to read minor movements, or in some cases, just the intent of a movement. When using spatial control, the NeuroNode 3.0 maps its place in space, allowing the user to associate specific movement patterns to actions and actions on their communication device. The advantage of spatial control is that it allows the device to be placed over clothing and is not dependent on specific muscle movement. Whether using EMG or spatial control, the user's activation settings are quickly and easily customized through the NeuroNode controller application that is pre-installed on their communication device. Settings in this application can accentuate intentional movement and filter out what is unintentional, making it a uniquely customizable solution for users with tremors or fasciculation. To learn more about the NeuroNode 3.0 or to schedule a demonstration with your local representative, visit us at www.controlbionics.com.
Okay, so now that you sort of saw and got a great idea about what that NeuroNode is, I'm going to make my screen bigger, so stop sharing that, and show you again just this NeuroNode. So if you look right at this device, it's just like a little circle of a little bit more than maybe an inch wide. There are 3 electrodes on the back. Those electrodes correspond to the person's those electrodes correspond to the device on the, or the bevels on the front. So these are the oh, hold on, something's happening. The electrodes that are active, and then this is a non-active electrode. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to show you finger flexion, okay? So if you look, when you move your, and you can do this on yourself, when you move your ring or your pointer finger, you're going to see movement right here. Now this, and for an occupational therapist, somebody that knows more about muscles than me, is clearly not the belly of the muscle, but because we're picking up the signal in the millions of microvolts, all I need to do is put those two active electrodes, making sure you can see those bevels, right along the length of that muscle. So here. So two active electrodes just on top of right on that muscle. The only thing you want to be sure is that I don't know why it keeps pulling up that share, but we don't want to share. The only thing you want to be sure of is that, hold on, keeps pulling up the share screen.
Yeah, you're good. We're still, we still got you. So.
Okay, you didn't see the share at all? Okay, perfect. All right. So I am going to open up this NeuroNode, and now that we have all these, sorry. So I am going to open up this NeuroNode app. I'm going to maybe try to move us around.
So are you setting one of the questions that came in is that, will there be a video of a person actually using it? Looks like you.
So I'm going to show you me right now using it, so you can get a good idea of sort of what, and again, I'm able-bodied, so it's really hard for me to mimic a disabled person, but you'll at least see the idea of how that works, and then I'll kind of explain how that might look different on somebody with a variety of disabilities.
Cool.
So this is the NeuroNode, and then all I do is go to that NeuroNode thing and connect my NeuroNode to the device. So this is just the application that they were showing, and there's the grid. So that blue line, when I put this on here, is literally my signal, the electrical impulse that my brain is sending to my body. When I am just at rest, as I am now, nothing's happening. When I make that finger flexion, you see that giant peak. Again, I'm an able-bodied person, so I get a pretty big peak. I wouldn't have to make that much movement. Like I could just do a little bit and I can turn that into a signal as well, but it's just sort of showing you how this actually would work. For somebody that's going to be using like EMG on their wrist, it's nice to use this watch band because then it sort of just sits on there. So this is essentially similar to an Apple Watch band. And it just slides on, and then the NeuroNode just clips right in here. So then I just tighten it. And again, the biggest thing to be sure when you're doing this is to make sure that all of the electrodes in the whole circle of the NeuroNode is sitting on the muscle that you want. If one of those is off, then you might get some feedback noise. So you need all of those electrodes on the back to be communicating to the device. So I make now the green and the are essentially our switch lines. So that's what's going to tell the device this is a switch. So for somebody with limited movement, like that isn't going to be able to get as big of a peak as me, I don't want them to have to work hard. The idea is that they don't need to put in a ton of effort. I want to look at what their effort looks like. So their blue line, I might be saying to them, make a movement, or can you move your finger if they're doing finger flexion, and just see what those lines look like. Then I'm going to go into my settings, which is that circle, cog and wheel in the very middle at the bottom. And here's the settings they were showing you. So those display settings, the y-axis is just showing you how much of the screen you want to see. So if they're making a big movement, you may want to zoom out and make that a larger picture. So I might want to stay more at like 190 or 200. If there's somebody that is like advanced stage ALS or somebody with a very minimal movement, you know, TBI, spinal cord injury, cerebellar ataxia, all those kind of things, then maybe you're going to be zooming in that camera so that you can get a really good idea of what those movements look like. As you scroll down here, you will see the ignore switch repeats or key press off delay. You don't need to worry about that too much. I'll talk about certain users that we might need ignore switch repeats, somebody that maybe gets a tremor and goes twice, or every movement is 2 times. So similarly to like a scan setting, you could do that. But what we're really looking at are these green and yellow lines. And the reason that we have them on the settings menu as green and yellow are the same reason, so that for a caregiver, somebody that isn't clinical or that doesn't understand necessarily kind of the mechanics of what is happening, we just want them to be able to look at the color coding. So I knew from my movement that I was getting, if I look, I was resting comfortably below that yellow line. I'm not having to work really hard to rest. I don't ever necessarily want to be coaching to somebody to say like, below that yellow, and then when you make your movement, getting above that. So I'm comfortably above and below, and those would be my switch settings. So if you look one button to the left of that cogwheel wheel, you see that cogwheel wheel with a arrow down, and that essentially saves my settings. So once we get a good place and we're like, this looks great, you know how this is working. When I say make your movement, you understand you're doing it repetitively and you're still resting comfortably below that line, then I feel comfortable saying, let's now look at the communication software part of this. So I can minimize this screen and pull up, for me, it's going to be about those 2 different users. So we have an eye control user, which would be just your typical eye gaze if you wanted to dwell or blink. We have the NeuroNode 3.0 user, which would be for somebody that is just going to scan. The eye gaze is not important to them, or they could not use the eye gaze, so they just want to scan with the device. So I can open up that and show you what it looks like for just somebody that's going to scan. So essentially, I make my movement to start the scan.
Row 1.
No.
Power 60.
When I make my selection, that's what is going to select the scan. So again, I'm going to make my finger movement.
Second row, I.
And these are the grid 3 scan settings, so you can speed this up or slow this down. It doesn't have to be auditory. However you feel like
second row,
your user might need to do it.
Third row, me.
And I can wait long, or if I needed to go really fast to get back down, then I could do that. So those are just the typical scan settings. The really big impact that we see is this combination method. For users that have not been successful with traditional eye gaze, whether that's nystagmus or fatigue, but they don't feel like scanning is fast enough for them. Then we look at our Trilogy user. Here, I'm using my eyes, and you can see my eyes are that little red dot. I'm using my eyes to look all over the screen, not until I get to where I want, that I make my selection. So I can look, if I'm trying to get to eye, I can look all the way up. I'm not there yet. Oh, I'm looking at home. I'm not there. Look back at eye. I make my selection, and then eye goes. So you can see that you have a little bit more control of your intentional movement because your eyes aren't doing anything for the selection, just how we typically use a device to look like a computer. We're not making any selections until our mouse clicks. So your movement now is your mouse click. So I can look all over the screen. If I have nystagmus and my eyes are starting to move to a side that I don't want them to, I can work and wait until I get to what I want and then make my movement. We have really found over this last year that this idea of being intentionally in control of your movement with your eye gaze is getting people so much farther with their communication, especially with the keyboard, or when it comes to one of these things where you're looking at a lot of buttons at one time. Again, with kids, you have to have time to like look at what you want to say and make the right movement. These are all going to be able to do that. So I could spell my name.
Megan.
And there it is. There must be questions from the group.
Yes, we do. The first one is, I'm assuming this device can be used by individuals with CP or mixed tone quadriplegia.
Yep. Now you may not decide to use it in the EMG setting, as I was showing that muscle movement. You may decide to use it in our next, the next kind of pattern of neuronode control, and that's the spatial setting. So for somebody with CP that has a lot of movement, I could either, depending on their motion, like let's say that they had a lot of like gross arm movement, I could still have it on their wrist and still be doing finger flexion, because nothing is going to happen until I make my finger movement. If it was somebody that didn't have that kind of control, they maybe like didn't have access, or maybe they're wearing like a wrist splint, right? Then maybe I'm going to use it in another mode that we talked about briefly on the video, but haven't shown yet, which is called spatial. So essentially this device has an accelerometer and it's its own place in space. So this is your wearable switch. So for somebody that had a lot of side to side movement, I could rule out that and only say the up and down movement is what I wanted to be the switch activation. So depending on that person's pattern, we could decide what is the intentional movement and what isn't by ruling that out.
Cool. Wow. So it's taking readings from you can customize it in basically any way that that individual's movement patterns go. Yeah, cool.
Yes. The nice thing about spatial is, beside that you can kind of make these profiles for patients, right? Like the other part is that with EMG, it really has to be on the skin. So there is like a little paper film on the back of this, but it just kind of sits, it's like a little bit of paper that sits on them, but literally it's just cold on their skin. There's nothing really like touching them. Sometimes for kids and maybe some adults that are nervous about putting things on their skin, that would be offsetting. It would take us an entire therapy session to get through, like, I promise this isn't going to do anything to you. So with the spatial setting, I can put it over the clothes because I'm literally just, this is your switch in space. It doesn't have to take a reading from anything. So I have a lot of success with both kids and adults putting this over the shoe and then moving their toes. For whatever reason, it's interesting that you think of like hand-eye coordination, but one of the #1 things that you've been raised hearing people say is, can you wiggle your toes? They say that to babies in the hospital. So it's almost a reflexive movement. So even for my candidates with late stage ALS that cannot stand and are bedbound, when you ask them what sort of movement do you have, they may say, I have no functional movement of my legs. I don't need functional movement. I just need any movement. Can you wiggle your toes? And all of a sudden you see a little bit of toe movement. I can put this over their sock and make an intentional movement with that.
Interesting. So one of the other questions that I think you've covered, but all of these devices, the wrist plus the eye gaze, those can all be used in conjunction together. So you can be using all 3 different sensors at one time. You don't have to switch and choose which one you're using. They all kind of function together to be customized to however that is going to best meet that person's needs.
Yes, what we really wanted to do was to be able to give users control and choice. If in the morning you wake up, you're a great traditional eye gaze user, I want you to be able to do that. I want you to be able to dwell and blink because that's what you're good at that moment. Then if you get your medication or you've had PT and OT and you're exhausted at 11 a.m., but you still have things you want to say, then I want you to be able to go into scanning or to use the switch plus eye gaze user. I want you to be able to use it however it works for you, whether that's the same all day or if it's you get to switch between. I feel like one of the biggest, most powerful things that I have witnessed in this job is that it's the way for the user to have control over their own life, whether that is consistency. So oftentimes I'll see people that have been trying to say something and use their eyes to do it for so long, and the eye gaze just isn't picking them up. They're looking and they say, I'm looking, but it's not getting anything. It's not fair that for them, like they're doing what they're supposed to, they're just not getting a feedback. And it's hard for us, either as clinicians or those in the field, to give them kind of confirmation. I see that you're trying. I'm so sorry the technology isn't working. So if it becomes something, and I think maybe it's their eye gaze that, you know, is now fatiguing out, I could switch them to that switch scanning and be like, I see that you're trying to do this. It just isn't working in that moment. And I can give them another win that might buy me a little bit more time for motivation or therapy or all of those things.
Very cool. We had another question come in. It's, can you add in other switches or switch interfaces to be used with this?
So I'm trying to, I think the most like the, yes and no. You can always plug in, if the device like has it, an extra like head mouse or a head switch if you wanted to. So you could have one, like the head switch is oh, thank you. Yeah.
I think we just kicked oh no, everybody's still on. Good. Sorry about that. My internet connection, I think, got flaky. I apologize.
No, that's fine. So I can quickly show, unless there's another question, but I need the spatial setting, kind of what I was maybe pull up this chat and see.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Oh, totally fine. So I am going to share my screen again. Go into the NeuroNode control. So in this one NeuroNode device right here, the same device, you can use either EMG or spatial or switch between them. Like both settings exist in this device. You may choose one and that's the area that you're going to use it, but you always have both if for whatever reason you needed to be able to switch back and forth. So in order to switch it to spatial, I need to go into, I should have explained that better. It's the hamburger button on the far left with the 3 lines. And I'm going to go into advanced and spatial control. And here I'm going to turn on by just putting a check mark in that spatial switching box. And what you're going to actually see now is these red, orange, or amber, or yellow. Everybody has a different name. Them all the way up because I'm just not sure, maybe when I can drag it, what my movement looks like just yet. So I'm going to come back out of here and go into graph. And now what you'll notice is my device looks similar. You still have the green and the yellow lines, and the blue line is still me. So green is still turning on the switch. The yellow at the bottom is still the resting line that we want to get below, and the blue is still me. But you'll see that there's now the addition of a red and an orange, and I notice my purple line isn't there, so I'm going to go back in, and just give that a check. And now you'll see a purple line. So when I'm looking at somebody that I'm potentially evaluating for spatial, so I'm just going to do this. You can see it's over my clothes, so it's not touching my skin. I'm just going to do wrist. So Again, you're looking at the screen, and we're gonna look at the red, purple, and orange lines right now, and we're gonna see as I move side to side, which one of those lines moves the most. So you'll notice the red line isn't moving at all. The purple line is giving you just a little bit, but that orange line is really jumping up and down, okay? So then I'm gonna look down at the bottom and you'll see just some tiny, the X axis is the red line, the Y is the amber or yellow or what, orange line, and then that purple is the Z axis. So I'm gonna choose the line that's gonna move the most. So I'm gonna choose orange. And again, we try to make this very color coded so you're not having to like think too much about like why that is. So I'm gonna go back into my settings. And I'm gonna turn the red line, I'm gonna pull this, turn this red line off and this purple line off, and I'm gonna just pull them all the way down, maybe, if it lets me drag for a minute. All the way down to 0. Oh, my, even if I have to hit the thing every time. So I'm just going to say that I don't want those lines to count in my movement at all. The only line I'm looking for is that orange because I want that side to side movement. And nothing else is showing. And you can either keep that Y axis showing, that Y coordinate, that top line, or you hide it. We only show them so that we know which movement we want to choose, but it's not changing anything. It doesn't count into the switch. Yeah, so I'm just gonna hide it. So we now are just looking at our regular. So the graph is gonna look exactly the same as it did when we were in EMG. Okay, so there's still the yellow line, the blue line still me. Clearly my rest looks a little bit different. And you'll notice the numbers on the side of the screens are much lower because now instead of taking it in terms of microvolts that's running the brain to the muscle, we're now doing it in gravities because the device is now in its own space. So when I move side to side, you'll see how big those movements get. So I'm still looking for the same thing. I still want to be sure that I can rest comfortably below that yellow. So right now I'm not super comfortable below that yellow. I'm still above it. So I need to raise that yellow line. And just sort of looking right now, I'm gonna say I need to be probably where my green line is for yellow, but between the 0 and the 0.1. So I'm gonna go back into that, my settings, increase it and see if that looks like when I go back to this graph. Oh, yeah, okay. If I'm still, oh yeah, so again, resting much comfortably below the yellow, and then I still can get comfortably above the green when I make my side to side movement. So for somebody that missed out, like I said, there's not, might start to look at somebody in space mode. There's a lot of blood flow that goes here. There's lots of stuff that comes. So making sure that we can get side to side with that head, I can essentially just set that in a bigger strap than this, but here on my head. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's amazing how you can kind of, I mean, it's customized in every single aspect to how that person can manipulate their controls. So.
And you think about the, the user over time, as I was saying earlier, I mean, these devices have to last 5 years, but sometimes more than that. So somebody's needs might change over time. And so what they once were doing before, whether that is finger flexion, now becomes wrist movement, or maybe I've seen people get so locked in that it's literally like the tip of their finger. Muscle that really goes to that. So that's when you might move from EMG to spatial. and not having to fund another device. You're not having to learn something new or override that motor plan. You're having the same device you've had forever with all of these different access.
So the customization, the adjustments of the movement sensitivity, is that done through a computer right there with the individual, and then how does that work? I guess is it software that's downloaded on that device, or?
Yeah, so the controller app, which was that
We were looking at.
Yeah, everything that comes on your device itself.
Okay.
So this app comes on every device that we sell, and that literally are tune as needed, that device. Typically, once you get a movement pattern, this is going to stay pretty stagnant. Now, the caveat to that is for somebody whose like needs might change throughout the day, somebody with like ALS. So as the day goes on, they're going to fatigue a little bit more. We do have a setting for that, and that is a check mark. Actually, I have to get off. Hold on, I got to go back to EMG.
While you're doing that, we did have someone from Colorado request that you reach out. So what Meg and I will, after you're done here, I'll shoot that over to you.
Perfect. And we do have a Colorado rep, somebody that lives right there in Denver. So hopefully somebody convenient and close can get right out to them. So the other big thing, like I was saying, for like going in and kind of finessing those signals over time, once you have a good signal, you can save it and you should be good to go. But if you're somebody that's needs are going to decline throughout the day, or maybe as you get going, you start getting more excited and getting more movement throughout the day, you can do this dynamic scaling. So if you look slightly to the bottom, I just put a check mark in that dynamic scaling box. And what that does is essentially takes an algorithm so that over time, the device will decrease with you. So if I have less and less movement for so long, that green line is going to start to fall on its own. Then you don't have to worry about, if I'm a caregiver, getting in there and having to change it all the time because he's trying to get it, but he can't. Or she's working really hard, but she's getting 2 selections. This dynamic is going to do it for them.
Cool. So this is, I'm assuming, running on a Windows machine. One of the questions that just came in is, will this work on an iOS, like an iPad phone?
So yes. So what I was demoing today is our Trilogy unit. So that is a Windows device, but we also sell it on an iOS device with the NeuroNode. It does come as one complete system. So there's no really like taking it apart. You either get all of it or none of it.
Very cool. Well, this has been great. I'll kind of pause there and fill a little space here to see if we have any other questions from anybody else come in. Megan, I really appreciate you showing me this. I think we might have met at ATIA.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Thought now that I see the face, you look familiar. So we did have one question come in. It says, how were you selecting the letter before?
I was looking at it with my eyes, but then making my finger when I got to the letter that I wanted. So you just look at your eye gaze so you know where your eyes are going, but then you make the selection with your finger. Okay. Or whatever, the eyebrow raise, whatever your point of.
That person just said, oh, okay, cool, thanks. And then another kind of follow-up question on the iOS, what iOS version has eye gaze and EMG?
No.
Right.
So once you decide that you are going to be an iOS user, iOS doesn't allow for eye gaze currently. That's always things in the work. So you would probably be somebody that's going to be a traditional scanner once you're going to use that. Now, if you get the newer eye gaze, you can get that head tracking feature. So that is a really interesting combination for somebody with more movement, and that can sustain that head movement. But then you could do a similar thing where you're moving your head to move the mouse and then making your selection with whatever your movement pattern is. So right now it's an interesting upgrade from Apple as they figure out what they're going to do about this eye gaze.
Very cool.